Hello.
Hello, sir. Okay. Good evening.
Okay, clear.
Clear.
Audible. Okay,
Audible.
thank you.
Okay.
ഞാൻ ആദ്യമായി കോളേജിൽ പോകുമ്പോൾ ഭാവിയെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള ആശങ്ക പലതായിരുന്നു. എന്നാൽ സുന്ദരമായ ആ ക്യാമ്പസിലേക്ക് കയറി ചെല്ലുമ്പോൾ ഒരു ആത്മവിശ്വാസം എനിക്ക് ലഭിച്ചു. നല്ല സുഹൃത്തുക്കൾ, സംശയമകറ്റി വെളിച്ചം പകർന്നു തന്ന അധ്യാപകർ, പുതിയ ആശയങ്ങൾ നൽകിയ ലൈബ്രറി, ഏകാഗ്രതയും നല്ല ഓർമ്മകളും നൽകിയ ക്ലാസ് റൂമുകൾ, ഡിജിറ്റൽ ലോകത്തേക്ക് പറക്കാൻ പഠിപ്പിച്ച കമ്പ്യൂട്ടർ ലാബ്. അങ്ങനെ MES കോളേജ് എന്നെ ഉയരങ്ങളിലേക്ക് സ്വപ്നം കാണുവാൻ പഠിപ്പിച്ചു. ഇന്ന് ഞാൻ വളരെ ഹാപ്പിയാണ്. സ്വപ്നങ്ങളെ പിന്നിലാക്കി ഉയരങ്ങളിലേക്ക് ഞാൻ പറന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. You have to dream before your dreams can come true.
MES College, Erumeli, proposed PO, Erumeli, Kottayam, unaided arts and science college under the Muslim Educational Society, approved by Government of Kerala and affiliated to the Mahatma Gandhi University.
So, good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar, COVID-19 Impact on Agriculture and Opportunities, conducted by IQAC of MES College, Erumeli, in association with Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. MES College, Erumeli, the very first standardized college under Muslim Education Society, started in 1995 with 3 UG courses. But now it has 7 UG and 7 PG courses and around 1,500 students. We have conducted already 12 webinars, and among them 4 are based on COVID-19. COVID-19 had badly affected India, so at the present situation, the webinar has a great relevance. We have here with us the resource person and chief guest, Dr.Jiju P. Alex, Director, Kerala Agriculture University, and also Extension Regional Coordinator. My name is Sir, Principal of MES College, Erumeli. Mrs. Rama Devi, Vice Principal and IQAC Coordinator. Sabjan Yusuf Sir, IT Cell Director. Jidesh K, CDC Director. Jace John, Anandu, Tansim, and Jinesh, Technical Coordinators. And above all, participants from all over India. I have an immense pleasure to welcome you all to the webinar. Firstly, I extend a hearty welcome to our chief guest, the resource person, Dr. Jiju P. Alex, Director of Kerala Agriculture University, and also Extension Regional Coordinator of Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. We are really honored to have you as the resource person, sir. On behalf of all of us present here, I welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
An institution like our college, if enters into a milestone, we can without any doubt say it's because of our beloved principal, my name and sir. It's my privilege to welcome you, sir, to this function.
Thank you.
We can say this is a second session of our webinar series, and the hard working and toil of those who behind the event is quite appreciable. I take this opportunity to welcome our Vice Principal and IQAC Coordinator, Mrs. Rama Devi, Madam. I welcome you to this webinar. Sabjan Yusuf Sir, IT Cell Director, is a man who really behind the event, and I take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Sabjan Yusuf, IT Cell Director, and his team members, Tansim, Jinish, Jace, and Anandu. Without Jidesh KS, the energetic CDC director, we cannot conduct a seminar like this. His innovative ideas benefited much to our college. Sir, I welcome you to this webinar. Last but not least, I welcome you all, the participants from all over India, to this webinar. Once again, I welcome each and everyone to the webinar. Thank you. Now, may I request Mrs. Rama Devi, a Vice Principal and IQAC Coordinator, to inaugurate the webinar. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you. Good evening, all. This is Rama Devi A, Vice Principal and IQAC Coordinator of MES College, Irumeli. The IQAC of our college is very serious in quality of education, and hence the series of national and international webinars. This is the 12th one. Agriculture is the foundation of any nation. India is doing very well in this domain for the past few decades. COVID-19 affected in this booming field and has a total negative effect both on production and employment. Hope that today's webinar may generate ideas that are useful in recovery of this field. Dr. Jiju P. Alex, Director, Kerala Agricultural University and Regional Coordinator of Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, is an eminent resource person who is an expert in this area. I am happy to inaugurate this webinar. So please be ready to hear a good analysis. Have a nice evening. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. May I request Mr. Jidesh Kayas, CDC Director, to introduce our chief guest, Dr. Jiju Pianas, for all of us present here. Over to you, Jidesh.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening to all. As you know, our resource person, Jiju P. Alex, is the Director of Extension, Kerala Agriculture University, and Professor with the Department of Agriculture Extension, College of Horticulture, Vellanikara. He completed his graduation in Agriculture Science and post-graduation in Agriculture Extension from the Kerala Agriculture University, and a doctorate from Indian Agriculture Research Institute, New Delhi, on the topic Participatory Planning for Agricultural Development through Local Self-Government Institutions, the Kerala Experiment. He started his career as a scientist with the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. He joined the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute, Kochi, in June 1997. Worked with the Socio-Economic and Technology Transfer Division till he joined the Kerala Agriculture University as an assistant professor in November 1999. He later joined the Information Kerala Mission, the flagship e-governance program of the government of Kerala for local self-government institutions. As the head of its Human Resource Development Division, on deputation, he joined back the Kerala Agriculture University in 2005. He has diverse experience on wide range of issues related to agriculture and rural development with focus on development, policy, technology, society, interface, innovation process, entrepreneurship development, rural democracy, and e-governance. He was instrumental in designing the training methodology for e-governance applications in local self-government institutions based on principles of andragogy. He also conceived and developed the KVK activity management information system for better administration of Krishi Vigyan Kendras. We very proud and pride to invite for this session. On behalf of MES College, Irumeli, I invite Dr. Jiju P. Alex for taking this session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for a lengthy introduction, and good evening, every one of you. I could see 27 participants have joined the program and a panelist of 6. So happy that I have been invited for this program. So I think we would go by a presentation rather, and maybe at the end of this presentation, we can have discussions. And it would be better to have that kind of a... is it okay for you? How is it?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So as rightly pointed out, by the faculty member who introduced this program, we are currently going through a very hard phase of humanity, and COVID-19 has redefined, and in fact, it has demolished all your earlier notions about movement, development, life, production, etc., etc. All walks of life have been affected by COVID.
Excuse me, sir.
Please.
Can you convert it to a presentation view?
Presentation mode. Okay.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Okay, sir.
Is it okay now?
Okay, sir. Now it's okay, sir.
Okay. So, in fact, one issue which is going to have immediate impact is food security. And every country, for that matter, would be having problems with respect to food security in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. And I have chosen my topic for today's discussion as food security and COVID-19 pandemic, priorities of development interventions to follow, maybe after the COVID, or maybe we may have to live with COVID, or during this pandemic and post-pandemic times, what is going to be our strategy on food security. So in fact, food security during a pandemic, we do not have any precedents. We do not have any previous experience. COVID itself was unprecedented and unexpected. And humanity, for that matter, has not seen this kind of magnitude with respect to food security. This kind of pandemic also has not been witnessed by the humanity so far. We have instances of Spanish flu and so many other things, but they were confined to some parts of the world. Geographical spread of that pandemic was not so severe as we see right now. But COVID, for that matter, has become global. There is no country which has not been affected by this. Maybe a few exceptions here and there, but still have got cases of COVID. And this has created panic among governments, among communities. And the immediate impact of COVID, particularly due to the kind of restrictive measures adopted by various governments, like lockdown, for example, in India, has primarily disrupted the food supply systems in the country and also across the globe. And you have to bear in mind that whenever such disruptions come, the developing economies are mostly going to be affected. And impact of such restrictions will be more on developing economies, which are predominantly agrarian in nature. So, for example, if it happens in Africa, the impact that it creates on the people would be more in Africa than the impact that it has created in the US, because of the size of the economy and also characteristics of the economy. So particularly when an economy is agrarian, it is going to have tremendous impact. And in fact, the standard definition of food security tells us that food security is availability of food, uninterrupted availability of food to all people at every point of time throughout the year. It could be out of production, it could be out of public distribution, it could be out of charity, it could be out of redistribution, it could be out of any other process. But if you have access to food, and that too at reasonable prices throughout the year, and that too nutritious food, then whether it comes from your own field or from somebody else's field, you can say you are food secure. But when you go by the standards of food security, you don't have, as I told you earlier, any precedences about disruption in food security due to a pandemic. And one instance where there had been similar case was the Ebola incidents in West Africa, way back in 2014. It's a deadly disease. Morbidity rate is much, much bigger than that of COVID. And if you get affected with Ebola, you are likely to die almost 80 to 90% sure. But the spread was not too fast as we see in the case of COVID. But there was a lot of concerns, a lot of concerns, and also a lot of uncertainty about the spread of that disease in Western Africa, particularly among the poor African community. And this had restricted their movements. And this was one instance where a pandemic was having direct impact on food supplies. So in disease containment areas, food production and movement were affected. And in fact, see, basically, this has got another implications. Also, it is not just that maybe out of fear people don't go anywhere. Out of fear people are confined to their households. They don't have access to food. They cannot produce food. They cannot transport food. So the supply chains are disrupted. That is one case. And at the same time, see, you have to maintain food security for the most vulnerable populations, even in the face of a pandemic. That also is important. And that is very important for preventing further spread of the disease. We can see FAO 2020 has underlined this importance, that if at all you want to prevent further spread of the disease, you have to make sure that the vulnerable communities are food secure. Because lack of food itself may lead to much further and severe calamities. So in such cases, they are coterminous to each other, complementary to each other. The disease spread may kill people. At the same time, the impact of the disease spread, particularly impact on food security, will further kill more people. So there is a multiplier effect of this pandemic on food security and also livelihood security for that matter, and also safety of the people. So in fact, what exactly was the impact of agriculture and impact of COVID on agriculture and food security? Coming to statistics, you can see the United Nations World Food Program has estimated that 135 million people had been facing acute food insecurity even before the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, there had been 135 million people across the world who were going to bed hungry. And pandemic has increased these numbers to 265 million people. 265 million people, almost, I would say, doubled. And by the end of 2020, it is likely to be double. So that means it has got severe impact on food security. And other issues which have been reported from across the world and which is projected as well is labor shortages due to morbidity, movement restrictions, social distancing rules. They impact, as I told you earlier, producers, processors, traders, trucking logistic companies in food supply chains, and particularly in those enterprises where workers are required. Workers require to be in close proximity. This is going to be a big issue. And also there is another unseen impact, the loss of income and remittance. So, you know, during the lockdown period, people have tried to confine themselves in the households, but many of them could not pull along much further because of lack of income. They had to go out. Compulsorily, they have to find sources of livelihood. It's very difficult for people to stay indoors. And see, this is a very important issue when such restrictive practices are enforced on people. You don't have the money to buy food. And at the same time, if you don't have money, then the producers would be at stake. The producers will not be able to produce further because their produce would get ruined. It is not going to be taken up by people. It is not going to be consumed, not going to be purchased by people. So purchasing power is very important. So farmers would not be able to get prices for their produce. Farmers themselves would not be able to produce. That is one thing. Secondly, whatever they produce would not fetch adequate prices, adequate remuneration. So that is another impact. And at the same time, what is going to happen is the hotspots of a pandemic could be a food security hotspot as well. We are familiar with that word hotspot. You know, that is the place where this pandemic or this disease would start or originate. and you have to conceal those places. You have to contain those places. You have to restrict movement in and out of those places to prevent further spread. So this itself may lead to some kind of temporary food insecurity. And basically, you have to understand the standard definition of food security. I told earlier that food security is nothing but availability of food, good or bad, by any means to the people. So if you have access to food, that means your food secure. But at the same time, there are certain other reasons by which you do not have access to food. So for example, Kerala is not food secure by production, but we have been food secure by way of supplies from outside. We have been food secure by way of the public distribution system. You have food grains which are produced from outside Kerala. You have vegetables which are produced outside Kerala. But still there is a mechanism by which you get access to all these stuff, food stuff, because of interstate transportation, public distribution system, etc., etc. But COVID has restricted entry of trucks to this place. And COVID has basically a prolonged restriction for movement of such transportation vehicles, good carriers. Trains were stopped. So temporarily, due to lack of transportation, Kerala suddenly became food insecure. So this could happen in other places also. So for example, a place which is affected by war, a place which is affected by riots, communal tensions, all such places are vulnerable to food insecurity. So that means food insecurity is not something which can be created only because of lack of food. It could be created even temporarily. Sometimes, say for example, in Syria, it's a war-torn country. There could be a chance that food is not available. Provisions are not available due to the war. So such temporary phenomenon can also happen. So we have witnessed such temporary phenomena in our country, in our state. We have never experienced that kind of thing, particularly this generation of you and me. How we have not so far witnessed any such instances where there is food insecurity. But in front of our eyes, we have experienced some instances of food insecurity, good or bad. And see, the country is affected by multiple crises resulting from more frequent extreme weather events, for example. That also is drought, floods. Flood also was another instance 2 years back, a severe flood, which affected all of us, had rendered us food insecure. So that means there are several causes by which food insecurity can happen. Maybe countries with significant currency depreciation, countries seeing other commodity prices collapse, all such factors would lead to food insecurity. And this particular case is a classic case of a pandemic creating food insecurity. So basically, this was one reason why many of the people in Kerala had turned to agriculture during the lockdown and also afterwards. We get thousands of queries from across the state, people who want to invest in agriculture, people who want to have their kitchen garden, people who want to reinvigorate their paddy lands, people who want to do something in agriculture, people who have taken it as a hobby, who want to make it commercial. So we have different types of people approaching us for technology, for advisories, and for so many other things. I think this is a classic example of how a food insecure society all of a sudden become aware of the requirement of food and also the need to have food security and responding to the exhortations of a government for that matter. So during the COVID briefing, lockdown briefing, the Honorable Chief Minister had exhorted people to turn to agriculture, try your hand in your homestead and produce something. And people have readily responded to that exhortation, and they have come up with wonderful ideas of creating food on their own in their surroundings. So having said that, we have to find out whether we are food insecure, the globe as a whole, at this point of time. COVID is spreading to several places. In India, it has been very slow earlier. Lockdown, we thought it is going to leave us. Some people had over enthusiasm and over expectation that we would be getting rid of this menace once the lockdown is over. But as expected by experts, we have seen even in Kerala, in spite of all the world-class measures that we have taken, we have not been able to contain this, and it is increasing day by day. It is going to soar to thousands and maybe 10,000, etc., etc. And we do not know what exactly is going to happen. But at the same time, there could be a concern that whether we are food secure or not. In fact, globally, we have adequate supply of foods as of now. In fact, all the staple food markets are well supplied. At the global level, there is absolutely no reason to be afraid of prospective food insecurity. Take all the food grains available across the world and divide it by the total world population. You can have food security for several months from now. So there is absolutely no problem as of now with regard to supplies. Food is available. But if you don't have a supply system for that matter, if you don't have the price, if you don't have the money to buy this, then there could be food insecurity. That's a different issue altogether. See, I would invite your attention to the definitions of famine by Amartya Sen, who quantitatively found out that famines are caused not because of non-availability of food grains, it is because of problems in redistribution. When your supply chains are disrupted, when there are inegalitarian ways of distribution of food grains, there could be problems. That could lead to famines. So that is the same condition here as well. So see, the Western world would be having adequate wheat and rice with them. Southeast Asia would be having adequate rice with them. As a whole, the global food security is not a big issue at all right now. We have adequate food grains to thrive, to sustain. And also, in fact, the global production levels for the three most widely consumed staples, rice, wheat, and maize, are at or near all-time highs, because basically because of the advancements in technology in agriculture production. We are increasing our production day by day. So as of now, there is no dearth of food grains at all. However, at the same time, the prices of certain cash crops, an important source of rural income, have been depressed by the slowing global demand. I am not talking about all the agricultural crops. No, I have been talking only about food grains. But when it comes to cash crops, say for example, rubber or your pepper or your cashew, you are not going to have that much demand. Why? Because of less purchasing power of people. People do not have money to be lavish in consumption. They have to restrict consumption. They have to regulate consumption. So the first and foremost thing that would be cut down in your budget would be the high cost and high value products. So if you don't feel like, you feel like having cashew nut, but you cannot buy cashew nut. So the cashew, basically that the end of that chain, the cashew producer would be having some problem out of this. So high value cash crops will be having some decline in prices, and that would be affecting the farmers. But food grains as of now will be having, it is adequate enough to meet our demands. So in fact, we have seen this issue of food insecurity. We have seen the impact of this COVID pandemic on food security. But what do you do basically to combat the impact of pandemic? What are the approaches that you can take? You just cannot blame people and sit back. So you have to do something. What exactly is the measure? What exactly is the strategy by which you combat the impact of this pandemic? See, across the world, development economists and other people have written widely on how the human society or communities take care of themselves, or they become resilient to overcome the impact of this pandemic or such unforeseen contingencies. How do they do? In the case of pandemic, there's a three-pronged strategy to deal with this issue. The first one is stabilizing incomes and access to food. The first and foremost thing. So you leave everything aside. You are shut down. You are locked down. You are in your household. You cannot move out. You are not allowed to move out. And some people do not have the sources of income. Since you are UGC professors, maybe you are getting lakhs of rupees. But this is not the case with the street vendor. This is not the case with a marginal farmer. He will have to toil every day to make both ends meet. So in such cases, the first and foremost thing that a government will have to do is to stabilize incomes and also ensure that everybody gets food. And you have to have adequate measures to preserve ongoing livelihood and food production practices, processes. You have to give assistance to make sure that such processes get along without any disruption. Particularly in the case of more acutely food insecure populations. Say, for example, the tribals, for that matter, maybe people who belong to the slums, or people who belong to a poor colony, or people who are migrant laborers. All those people have to be taken care of. So the first and foremost thrust should be on such vulnerable population who are likely to be affected by this immediately. So that is the first strategy. And second strategy is continuity of the critical food supply chain for the most vulnerable populations. How do you do that? You do that through support to the sustained functioning of local food markets. You have to make sure that food markets are not closed down. You have to make sure that your trucks carrying food are not stopped by police, or for that matter, any other restrictive forces. So you have to make sure that your value chains are on, and you have to make sure that your systems are working. And also you have to make sure that the smallholder producers and food workers, all who are critical in the supply of food, are safe from the disease. At the same time, there are supply mechanisms across the nook and corner of the country. That is very important. I will tell you some examples as to how these strategies have been implemented in Kerala. So, for example, stabilizing incomes and access to food. How do you do that? One way of doing that is to dole out money as much as possible. So any immediate support to the people in cash or in kind will be very helpful to thrive these difficult times. So they need not be concerned too much about food, because food is supplied by the government or somebody for that matter. So for example, you have the community kitchen. Community kitchen was nothing but a brilliant example of how this strategy could be worked out, could be implemented. And second one is the continuity of critical food supply chain. So what has actually happened in Kerala? Kerala has witnessed a rise of an absolutely informal but efficient system of food supply chains. Producers started looking for avenues of selling their products. The Department of Agriculture stepped in. The university stepped in. And several other people who were concerned about such issues, philanthropists, they stepped in. And then they started harnessing people, their producers, and they formed informal supply chains using social media and all that, WhatsApp groups, Facebook live streams, etc., etc. They said, okay, there is a colony over here where food is produced, maybe vegetables are produced by farmers, and why don't you take it? So the urban centers, particularly conclaves, residential areas, flats, inhabitants of such places came down, and then they started buying. There was an element of charity as well in this. They said, okay, pineapple farmers of Ernakulam district have to be helped. So pineapple was delivered at the doorsteps. The pineapple cost, that time it was only 20 or 10 or 10 rupees. They were ready to purchase it for 20 rupees as a means of their, say, showing their charity or their concern to the producer. So there was an emergence of an informal supply chain mechanism all of a sudden as a means of resilience, as a means of coming out of this crisis. So at the same time, the third strategy is people along the food supply chains are not at risk of COVID transmission. That also is very important. And basically, this is sourced from the FAO. They have come up with beautiful status papers on how the pandemic is going to affect the food systems. And they have very categorically mentioned that people along the food supply chain have to be protected from the disease. So they have to have all gears, they have to have the PPE, so whatever it is, sanitizers, masks, etc., so that the food supply, the vital supply chain is not disrupted at all. So these three-pronged strategies, an immediate strategy proposed by the FAO, which have to be adopted by every country for that matter. In fact, some other restrictions, some prerequisites also have been suggested by global agencies. The first one is export restrictions should not be there, should have to be lifted, and all the barriers to supply food, whether it is on political grounds, whether it is on other trade grounds, or whether it is on other maybe diplomatic grounds, or whatever it is, they have to be opened up. And new trade barriers should not be imposed on any country for that matter. So, for example, maybe because of the WTO restrictions and all that, there could be restrictions on export and import. You are not supposed to import something from some country. But in the COVID pandemic, all those global laws have been set aside. People said, okay, it cannot happen at all because this is a do or die situation. It's a matter of life and death. So if such matters come up, all your systems have to go back. So you don't have schools right now. You don't have colleges right now. All whatever you had valued to be so important and inevitable, have taken a back seat right now. So we are no longer insisting people to submit their assignments onto your table. You no longer ask people to complete things on time. So it's a matter of life and death. So there is absolutely no scope for any restriction. So that was one specific instruction given to countries, particularly in the period of this pandemic. And coming to India, during the initial weeks of the lockdown and also this COVID pandemic, in fact, this happened in Kerala first and got extended to other states. And many of the states were not very serious about this in the first instance, and they realized the gravity of the situation only later. But at that point of time, see, we had a requirement of 214 lakh tons of wheat and rice at the beginning of January 1, 2020, at the beginning of this year. The Food Corporation of India had almost about 565.11 lakh tons, roughly 2.5 times more than the essential requirement for public distribution. So whatever we had required was not this much, but we have food stock to the tune of 565.11 lakh tons, which is roughly 2.5 times more than what we really require. So that means there need not be need not be concerned about the availability of food even in India. We have adequate food supplies. But only issue is where there is inadequate public distribution system. So in the face of inadequate public distribution system, so for example, we have the Food Security Act enacted a few years back, and we have, instead of statutory ration, we have target-oriented ration public distribution system. And out of all these things, we have almost about 10 crore people who do not have adequate ration cards. So how do you get the requirements of such people is a big concern. That's a problem. So unless you have an adequate public distribution system, your food supply would not be good, would not be sufficient. So this is the only concern. Other than that, India as a country does not have food security problems in principle, in theory. And coming to the Indian experience of dealing with the COVID, it has been almost settled. We have several cases to present before you, but the most disastrous instances, which we would always hesitate to remember, who do not like to remember, was the migration of millions of people who were trapped in urban areas back to their places, particularly when the disease was spreading at the initial stage. all of a sudden there was a lockdown declaration, and there has been huge losses of livelihoods. And the migrant laborers who were somehow or the other managing the towns don't have any means of livelihood. So they decided to go back, and that too in thousands. They did not have adequate transportation facilities, even though some facilities were arranged later. They were not adequate. People started walking long miles, thousands of kilometers. There were several heartbreaking instances where people have died on their way, on the roads, etc., etc. Children dying. So what exactly was happening? It was some kind of a reverse migration happening in India. And all these issues, which I have listed in this presentation, loss of livelihoods, labor availability, reverse migration, lack of access to markets, low demands. That was very important. You don't have money. You don't want to buy things. So there is low demand, and that would directly affect or impact production process. Another important thing which we have witnessed during the lockdown and also even now afterwards is we don't have storage facilities. Our warehousing system is so inadequate. Except for the fact that the Food Corporation of India has got storage facilities, we don't have decentralized storage facilities wherein farmers can keep their things for a later period. They will have to sell out everything all of a sudden, maybe immediately 1 or 2 days after the harvest. Most of the things are perishable, except the food grains and pulses and millets and other durable products. Many of those things, many of the fruits, many, almost every fruit, vegetable for that matter, they are all very perishable. And unless you have warehousing systems and storage networks, cool chambers, etc., you cannot keep those things for a longer period. That was one big issue which we have witnessed at that point of time. And another issue was inadequate value chain management system for small producers. They did not know what to do with their produce. That was another impact of COVID on agriculture. So in fact, all of a sudden there had been an increase in the concern about the plight of these farmers and also poor people in India. Many countries had come up with economic packages to combat these issues. US had come up with a hefty package. Spain, Italy, Japan, China, Singapore, Maldives, many countries have come up with hefty economic revival packages to help the people and also to revive their economies. And India was a bit late to come up with a package, but in fact, India came up with a huge package afterwards, and then it had components to deregulate produces. Hoarding was controlled, hoarding was banned. Many products were deregulated. That means it could be sold and purchased at any price, particularly in the face of this COVID. And there were several packages for fish workers, livestock farmers, etc., etc. It is part of the huge 20 lakh crore package which was announced in India. I mean, it was one component. And also there were some liberal movements on the part of the government to permit barrier-free interstate trade of farm commodities and ensure legal framework to facilitate contract farming and so on. Though they're all nitty-gritty, I don't want to get into those things. So in fact, the booster package announced in India had these components: 1 lakh crores to be given to agriculture cooperatives, 10,000 crores for formalization of micro food enterprises, 20,000 crores for fishermen to enhance production by 70 lakh, 28,000 crores in animal husbandry, 40,000 crores for herbal cultivation, 5,000 crores for beekeeping. So the agricultural revival package contained all these factors. This is the case of India. And what would be the post-COVID agriculture, if at all there is a chance that we all would be able to resume all our normal activities, or is it going to be the new normal? I do not know. Many of us do not know. If at all it happens, if we can come back to normalcy after this, what would be the scenario? So most of the important things that are likely to happen post the post-COVID scenario would be new investments in agriculture infrastructure. I told you don't have warehouses, you don't have machines, you don't have value chain systems, you don't have processing houses. So in the wake of such a pandemic, and also anticipating that such pandemics are likely to happen across the world, particularly because of climate change, and there were so many other things which are happening around us, we have to be careful. We have to have safeguards. We have to be vigilant. So in such cases, you have to attract huge investments or new investments in agriculture for infrastructure and contract farming. So you have to have some well laid out plans and also agreements with the farming community so that their production is not at stake. It is not going to suffer. And also there have to be some legal framework. All those things are coming up. I think this is a much, for an audience like you would not be relish too much of technical things that have come in this presentation. And the third one I would say is permission to private players to invest in inputs and other things. So one issue which I would like to bring to your attention is that during the COVID period and afterwards, since people have turned to agriculture on a large scale, there is a huge dearth of inputs. So for example, people are looking for seeds, people are looking for planting materials, people are looking for fertilizers, people are looking for organic inputs to enhance their production. So that means all our systems which were supplying these inputs could not meet the demand. There was a surge in demand. There was a huge demand which is coming up all of a sudden. So the systems did not have the capacity to rise to that occasion. So even the agriculture university, hundreds of people come every day in search of, say, better varieties and all that. We have exhausted many of our reserves. We are now in the process of creating new things, or maybe producing new seeds and other things. It's not possible for us because just unprecedented increase in demand was there. So it could not be met. So there could be more further reforms and inevitable entry of new players, and world is going to be different, particularly in agriculture. We are going to have new systems of production, new systems of supply chain, and most probably there could be more global players making use of such scenario. So there could be this fear of a panic and fear of a pandemic in the air. This is going to stay for a while, and even afterwards, even after everyone on the surface of Earth gets immunity towards this COVID pandemic, this experience is not going to leave us, because humanity will always be anticipating such catastrophes, and we will be having safeguards. Even India will have to now move on to taking safeguards to alleviate this kind of pandemics or this kind of contingencies. So I think I don't go to the reforms and all that. See, what are the different types of development interventions which we have to think of in such cases? The first and foremost thing is I as a person and also I as an academician believe that there has to be an enhanced role of the public sector. So you can see the health sector, for example, in Kerala. Every COVID patient is being treated by the government. There could be a question whether the government should do it or not. But when compared to the experiences in the developed economies, Kerala is putting forward a model which has not been tried out anywhere in the world. Many other countries are also doing the same thing. That your subject, a citizen, is treated by the government. This could not be given to a private sector person, maybe because I am not blaming and the services rendered by the private sector, but in such exigencies, since there is an issue of profit and loss, it would be the government which would be the most instrumental thing. All the government ministries will have to be strengthened nowadays. For example, health sector will have to be strengthened. I would say that, okay, the private the private sector also will have to be robbed in amicably and also suitably. But at the same time, see, if you have an immediate response, should be coming from the public sector. So there has to be enhancement of the public sector. And decentralized governance has been proved to be very effective. In Kerala, one reason why we have been so successful in containing this pandemic is because of decentralized governance. And we have given power and authority and financial resources to all the local self-government institutions. And they have been able to, say, put in place various institutional requirements which were required for containing this pandemic, or at least preventing the spread to a large extent. So, for example, you have your community kitchen put in place by the panchayats. You have the rapid response team, again triggered by the panchayats. You have voluntary co-ops to attend to various things, to find out residences, maybe vigilance over, your quarantine. All those things could be, at least to some extent, we could do it effectively because of this decentralized governance. So that has to be further strengthened. And how to engage the community is another important issue. Even though you are keeping social distance, you have to be closer by hearts, particularly unless you have a very close listening between people, helping each other, even though you are physically away. You have to have systems of community participation, which is very important in such cases. And another one is the social capital formation. In the sense, we are talking about social capital formation in form of Kudumbashri and also so many other aggregates of human beings or collectives of human beings. We have to have much more well-defined forms of human capital formation or social capital formation to fight such cases. Say, for example, livelihood security. How do you do that? How do you bring resilience? How do you attain resilience? Some people who have been doing some traditional jobs have shifted to new jobs. Some people have abandoned their traditional activities and have shifted to, say, they have started trying their hands at new things. So people have started coming together. So now today's paper has got one very interesting thing. So people who are in distress, particularly those who have been affected by COVID, have to be soothed. They have to be counseled. So who is going to do that? A normal person will not be able to do that. Maybe they can do it only through the phone or maybe social media. So people who have got affected and who have got immunity can maybe help. So the government is now trying to have collectives of people who have escaped from COVID, who have undergone COVID treatment and who have been cured. They will be instrumental in counseling people who are affected by this disease. So see, new formations are happening, new things are happening, new mechanisms are happening. So that is the social capital formation, and also new forms of organizational linkages, new forms of generating domestic demand. That is very important. I told people who are not buying pineapple, or maybe in Thrissur there is a very specific and unique variety of cucurbit, a melon, which is called a snap melon. In Malayalam, it is called pottu vellari. Pottu vellari is something which would break off, its skin would break off when it becomes ripened. It can be used only for making juices. That is towards the Kodungalur belt in Thrissur. And this is a delicacy during summer. You can see several shops on the roadside, selling this along with the watermelon. That is not available everywhere because people do not like this. It is very difficult to hold that. Once it becomes ripe, it erupts. It erupts like a volcano. Everything comes outside. So it is very difficult to handle. But this can be handled and this can be used for juice. It is having some medicinal value. It is very good for health. So snap melon farmers were having a supply chain of their own. They used to make it in huge quantities on rice fields and other places. They harvest it and they used to give it to juice centers or juice shops. But with COVID, there was no juice shop. There were no travelers on the road. So it could not be sold out. So what did they do? We helped them to advertise the importance of snap melon. We advertised on the social media that snap melon is a healthy drink. So then there had been demand. There were new demands coming up. So then they transported most of those stuff to, say, the urban areas. In Thrissur town, many of the flats, people then, as I have told you about pineapple. So see, this kind of local and domestic demand will have it. It was not there. Then people, okay, there is no supply of vegetables from Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. Then what do you do? So you have to depend on your vegetables. And then they started looking for vegetable producers. Many people who did not have the opportunity to sell their things got opportunity because of this. So this is how they overcome this issue. And also new forms of efficient value chain management, diversification of enterprises, all those things are maybe. And also another important issue is we have to think of new ways of creating rural employment, which is very important. MGNREGs, for example, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program was a big step towards that. and maybe in the wake of this COVID, they have decided, the governments have decided to give more employment days, and also the money, the remuneration has been enhanced. So mechanization is another important issue in agriculture for that matter, because everyone has turned on to agriculture, and it will be difficult for us to manually do the operations. So you have to have either collective ownership of machines, or you can have your own machines, small machines which can be used in homesteads, big machines which can be used in vast areas. So mechanization is going to take a very important role in the wake of this COVID. Also, see, managing knowledge is very important. So I told you, Agriculture University has got the mandate of extension. I am the director of extension, that is reaching out to the people. We produce technologies, we create knowledge, and we take this knowledge to the farming community through several means. So see, we have seen an unprecedented use of our media. Our websites are visited by thousands of people. Our Facebook streams are visited by thousands of people. Our YouTube is visited by thousands of people. So many queries coming to our stations across the state. People are asking for technologies. How do you do this? How do you make investments? What can I do in agriculture? I have got a piece of land. Can you convert that to a farm so that I have returned from Gulf? Many people are doing that. I have returned from some other place. I don't want to go back. So is there any scope for livelihood in agriculture? All of a sudden, people have abandoned many of the other avenues and have concentrated on agriculture. So you have to have a very robust system of knowledge management. And also you have to have productive use of land and other things for also human resources training and so many other things which are all associated with each other. These are all the tremendous impact that COVID is going to create in Kerala and also in the country and also across the world. So I am not here to tell you a wider perspective of what is going to happen as a result of COVID. We are all experiencing it every day. We are all teachers, and we have not seen our students for several months together. Our colleges are shut down. We do not know by what time they would be able to come back and resume this academic activity. And we do not know. We had a bleak future, We don't know what is going to happen. So this has never happened in the recent history of humankind. We have not had any experience of undergoing a war. We have not had any experience of undergoing severe, say, natural disasters. We do not have severe droughts. We do not have severe floods. We do not have this kind of pandemics as well. But we are now getting tuned to that kind of things which other parts of the world were experiencing. We have only read about wars. We have read only about genocides. We have only read about genocides. We have only read about people fleeing their countries. But now in Kerala also, in India also, you can see that kind of instances. So in fact, I would just wrap up by reminding you of the experiences of Kerala. As I told you, Kerala has created a model of combating the pandemic, which has attracted global attention, not only in the health sector, but also in other sectors, because in health, it has been an unprecedented victory because of the investments that we have made in the health sector due to the public sector presence and also the commitment of the horde of health workers which we had, and also the timely intervention of the government and the machinery which was put to use efficiently by the rulers. All those things have contributed, and also the other factors which I had mentioned earlier. So now in agriculture also, particularly with respect to food security, we had come up with some very innovative approaches. We have declared special packages for healthcare. We distributed our pensions on time. Even today, there was a declaration by the Finance Minister of Kerala that we do social security pensions are going to be aggregated and distributed for people during these times of difficulty. And livelihood enhancement, several programs were declared by the government. Community kitchen, there was a special drive, and I would tell you about that. Special drive for food self-reliance, strengthening the local markets, and extensive use of social media and live stream programs. So many things were happening during these 2 months. I do not know how many of you are aware of that, but being a person in the agriculture sector, we are witnessing it every day, and we are trying to devise new mechanisms by which such things are getting onto the people more effectively. So coming to one important intervention by the government has specifically come up with a program called Subiksha Kerala. You might have heard about this. You might be hearing about that also. There was an interaction with the Honorable Chief Minister a few weeks back, and that has been televised across the state in all the major channels. When I had an opportunity to be the CM, and we had an interaction. There was 3 episodes in major channels. It was there, particularly exclusively on Subiksha Kerala. It's a 3,000 crore package, and it is going to be an integrated project. It is not only for food self-sufficiency in terms of fruits or vegetables or food grains. It is for meat, milk, and egg. All those materials which we use as food, we have to have self-sufficiency. But coming back to statistics, as far as food grains are concerned, rice production in the state is only 15%, even less than that of our requirement. There is a huge gap of production as far as rice is concerned. In vegetables, we have been able to attain almost about 55 to 60% self-sufficiency. We are having a gap of 40%. As far as pulses are concerned, we are producing only 0.1% of the total requirement that we have. We have huge deficit of pulses. Most of our ulna, tuvara, black gram, green gram, your red gram, all those things which we use daily are coming from outside. We don't produce even a single, at least even 0.1% of our requirement. We don't produce that. And tubers are going to be a major source of carbohydrates right now, particularly since we don't have much food grains produced. We have to depend on, and jag for that matter, which is a state fruit of Kerala, has been a great source of food during the COVID, particularly during the summertime. This summer was a memorable summer for that matter, because jag has become the king of all foods, and every household used to depend on jag for that matter. And also now we are thinking of integrated farming systems, wherein a household will be having all components: food grains, vegetables, fruits, fish, poultry, meat, etc., everything grown in a single system, which is difficult to manage, but there is possibility. And the government has come up with a very ambitious program of establishing 14,000 integrated farm units across the state. And we intend to produce much, enhance our productivity, at the same time safeguard the interest of the farmers who are exclusively depending on agriculture for their livelihood. That is very important. You are a professor, I am also a professor. We need not produce food in your homesteads, but there are people who are producing food, their livelihoods. That is the only source of income. In such cases, we have to safeguard the interest of such people. So all those mechanisms which have to be put in place to safeguard or to maintain agriculture should be focused towards the ultimate producer, who is making a life out of this, who is depending on agriculture for his income. So such people have to be taken care of. So there are certain schemes and other things coming up for that too. And most important thing is, how do you manage the supply of such materials? How do you manage your market? How do you manage your supply chains? How do you manage your value chain systems? So that the government of India has come up with a concept of doubling farmers' income. So you have a farm, you have to double the income. And the kind of remuneration the farmer is getting is very, very less when compared to the government servant, or for that matter, any other person who is involved in any other job. So it is very difficult for him to sustain a farm. The economy of scale issues are further creating problems. So the plight of a farmer is so bleak, it is so pathetic, it is so sad. So I think there is a new enthusiasm, a newfound enthusiasm as far as agriculture is concerned. I think the COVID pandemic has shown us certain lessons. It has taught us certain lessons that food security is very important. And if you really want to be a sovereign republic, that sovereignty is not a question of political power alone. Sovereignty is also a question of your food security. This food sovereignty is very important, and Kerala has realized it, And Kerala is now trying to move to that kind of an action program, and we have to be part of that. And it is our bounden duty to support the farming systems, the farming community, the farmers. Don't hesitate to pay a bit more when you negotiate with a farmer for, say, your bhindi or your brinjal or your tapioca or whatever it is. Please bear in mind that it is produced by a poor person who is depending solely on agriculture for his livelihood. So being a representative of such community and being a person who is dealing with agriculture every day in my life, I think this has been a good experience for me to share my views with you. And this is exactly what COVID is going to have for us. We do not know what is going to be our future, but agriculture will have to stay, because every human being, even the last one, will have to have some food to eat. So I think this is very important, and we have to support all the initiatives of the government to come up with this, to attain food self-sufficiency of the state. And with this, I stop. Thank you so much for being with me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir, very much for your valuable presentation, sir. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your valuable and powerful presentation, sir. We are really grateful because your time is very precious, and we know you are too busy, and we are really grateful for you to spend your valuable time with us. And shall we wind up, sir?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So you can have any queries or something of that? I don't have any problem. You only, if somebody has to say something, somebody has to ask some questions, you can, maybe I can spend maybe 5-10 minutes. Usually that is the way we do it.
Yeah.
If you don't have any queries, we can wind up.
Maybe because of some hostile conditions, we really expect more participants, but maybe.
Still 58 are there.
Yes, sir.
We simultaneously upload in YouTube, sir. YouTube.
Okay. Yeah. So it is available in YouTube?
Yeah. It's on live. There is.
No, that would be there in the YouTube afterwards?
Yes. Right. It's available in YouTube.
So which channel, which address?
MES Voice. MES Voice. Muslim Educator Society Voice.
Voice. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. If you have any queries, you can ask maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and maybe I can spend that time.
Sorry, you mentioned.
I am from my office. I am not at home.
Okay. Yeah. You already told, sir. Yesterday I called. You are in a conference.
Yes. So this is a regular thing, which happens every day. You have the.
Okay. We appreciate your energetic
speeches.
manner. Okay, sir. As you told earlier, how we can use the technology in agriculture sector more. Now our youth are diverted to technology areas, but that their contributions are a little bit in agriculture sector. How can develop their attitude views to change their views to agriculture areas?
Okay, that's very important, because so many people have seen agriculture as a very old-fashioned activity, wherein there is no scope for in technology. But modern agriculture is not like that. Modern agriculture has got tremendous technology components involved in it. So right from, say, mechanization, we are now training our rural youth to use machines as much as possible. So even operating a tractor and its associates itself requires skill, So we have got the food security army, where people are trained on machines alone. So that becomes a decent job for many people. That is one thing. And another one is, high intensity production systems can be put in place. So for example, you have the greenhouses, you have artificial intelligence, you have robotics, and ever so many other applications in agriculture. And another one is the distribution system. So for example, we have got exclusive mobile apps to facilitate marketing of producers. So in every sector, you can see application of technology. In any other sector, particularly when it comes to value addition, it is nothing but technology. Nothing but technology. You are having processed foods, packaging, moving things out of places, maybe transporting things. All those things involve technological components, and that too hi-fi technology. I would say high-end technology, for that matter. Cutting-edge technologies are required. And I don't think because it's not an old-fashioned one. It is basically technology intensive. There is scope for people to invest in technology as well. I don't think we don't have time to explore too much about this today. Maybe we can think of that later, maybe for a different session.
Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then
Thank you.
also, how we feel the lockdown effect on agricultural areas? Some areas badly affected the lockdown. Sir, can you
Those I have already explained in the presentation. The first part of my presentation was exclusively on that thing. Lockdown and restrictions on movement have affected particularly the supply chain. Supply chain in the sense you cannot take your products from one place to another. So there has been disruptions in supply. So that was one immediate effect. And later on, what has actually happened is now you don't have much demand for products. You don't have the purchasing power to have high value products. So this has reflected on the production side. People have started feeling that it is not going to be profitable. It has got mixed response. At some places, it has created some demand. At some places, it does not created. So I quoted that FAO study where it said, high value crops will not be of much demand because people don't have the purchasing power right now. And see, another important thing is the large scale use of such things have been restricted right now. One thing which we have experienced is, say, we don't have any social functions as of now. You can have at the best, you can have only 50 people, in a social function. You cannot have more than 20 people in a social function. You don't have your celebrations. You don't have your marriages. You don't have your other things. So wherein food was a major delicacy, food was a major attraction. So you don't have such places at all. So this has basically affected production. So that is one thing which you have. So there are so many ramified effects, multiplier effects on these things. I think I have listed those things in my presentation. Many of those things were related to issues in supply chain.
Sir, if we consider agriculture as an investment, then how can develop a portfolio model for agriculture? Suppose in our district, Kottayam district, there the farmers are mostly concentrated on rubber. Then in Idiki, they're most concentrated on Elam, cardamom. Then how can develop a portfolio for agriculture?
Agriculture now, something which I have not included in this presentation was emergence of new systems. Say, for example, we have the farmer producer organizations. Small farmers will have to come together and make investments, and that too in scientific agriculture production. And then you can have your own systems of finding out your consumers, that you assured consumers for that matter. And one thing which I have already told you is about contract farming. The government of India has come up with a new legislation for contract farming, where the conventional norms of contract farming has been revisited. They have come up with provisions to facilitate these small farmers and small farmer consortia or small farmer producers organization to get into negotiation with other buyers, so that the interest of the farmer is not at stake, is not affected. So new forms are coming up, and maybe for niche markets, particularly for exclusively important products, you can think of investments, and also you can think of supply chains and value chains, which can even go global. That is possible. So in cardamom and all that, it is already there. There are well-defined value in supply chain systems. They have market systems and all that. But there are certain other places where we don't have that kind of well-defined systems. In rubber also it is there. Rubber is having a different case altogether. That's a different thing altogether. That is not because of lack of such systems. It is because of some other external factors, which we all know. But whereas in the case of spices and also fruits, vegetables, flowers, etc., we are yet to come up with that kind of systems. There is good possibility if we can aggregate to a production. One problem with Kerala is we have only small producers and small holders. It will not be profitable for the small producer to have a very small amount of products and then sell it into a big market. It is not going to be easy for them. So you have to have aggregation of products. You have to have agencies to procure that. and then you have to ensure that it is proper and it is properly done and it is conforming to all the standards stipulated by global agencies. You have to ensure that quality and standards are kept and maintained, and then you have to take it up, and then how systems of finding out markets even outside the country. So there is possibility people are trying to do that. Several private investors and agencies are coming up with that kind of portfolios, maybe that kind of investments. So it is coming up, but not in large scale. We have to facilitate it further.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now it's the time,
Okay, it's okay,
6:45.
Okay.
We have to wind.
So you did
now
not
we have
expect
to
me
wind.
to talk this much.
Okay, then we are ready to wind up, sir. No
Okay,
problem.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for the opportunity that you have given. And also I would like to announce you one thing. We are going to have a program, again a webinar on UBA, Unat Bharat Abhiyan, on 23rd. Most probably it is going to be on 23rd. So I will send you the link and also other details. So you will get a very good understanding of how UBA could be conducted. And the National Coordinating Institute, IIT Delhi, they themselves are, maybe Professor Vijay, who is the national coordinator, is participating. Our Vice Chancellor would be inaugurating the session. So it will be a good opportunity for you to have exposure to the method by which UBA is conducted. So I think I invite you all to participate in that program also. I shall send Jidesh the link and other details.
Thank you, sir. I got it.
Okay, so you disseminate that information to your group, particularly those people who are coming.
Definitely,
And,
sir.
we'll be
Definitely.
glad to see you there. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, shall we wind up, sir? For a formal,
Certainly.
For a formal note of thanks, I once again invite Mr. Jidesh KS. Over to you, Jidesh.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening to all. Honorable source person, Dr.Jiju P. Alexa, our principal Mahinaman sir. I'm our IQAC Vice Principal Rama Devi ma'am. Dear colleagues, I thanks IQAC for giving me the opportunity to express my gratitude on the special event. It is the biggest day in the history of our college. Today we have hosted the 13th biggest webinar. I consider it is a privilege to propose a vote of thanks to all dignitaries who have witnessed it as a memorable and successful event. Today, my words are not enough to express the gratitude. On behalf of MES College Erimeli, I would like to thank our Chief Guest, Dr.Jiju P. Alex, Director Extension, Kerala Agriculture University, and Regional Coordinator of Unat Bharat Abhiyan, who graced us with the thought-provoking address, a set of perfect platform for our community. And also, I apologize for you, sir. The participation is not up to our expectations. So I apologize to you too, sir. Then our principal, I would like to thank our beloved principal for all words of wisdom, the radius source of energy within us. We will ever remain grateful to you, sir. We thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Magin, sir. Then our management give unextended support for all the functions organized by our IKC team. Thanks to our management. We have been fortunate enough to backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated IQAC, ITCL and research forum. I cannot thank everyone enough, the involvement they have shown, the willingness they have expressed to take the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zone. Special mention names behind the screen, Rama Devi Madam, IQAC Coordinator, Shiba Michael Ma'am, Dean, Students Dean, Subjan Yusuf, Director, ITCL, Anandu, Tanseem. Last but not least, I thank all the participants for your cooperation and made this event successful completion. We feel proud and thank you for making us feel happy with your presence to this function. Once again, thank you very much to all who joined here. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
ഞാൻ ആദ്യമായി കോളേജിൽ പോകുമ്പോൾ ഭാവിയെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള ആശങ്ക പലതായിരുന്നു. എന്നാൽ സുന്ദരമായ ആ ക്യാമ്പസിലേക്ക് കയറി ചെല്ലുമ്പോൾ ഒരു ആത്മവിശ്വാസം എനിക്ക് ലഭിച്ചു. നല്ല സുഹൃത്തുക്കൾ, സംശയമകറ്റി വെളിച്ചം പകർന്നു തന്ന അധ്യാപകർ, പുതിയ ആശയങ്ങൾ നൽകിയ ലൈബ്രറി, ഏകാഗ്രതയും നല്ല ഓർമ്മകളും നൽകിയ ക്ലാസ് റൂമുകൾ, ഡിജിറ്റൽ ലോകത്തേക്ക് പറക്കാൻ പഠിപ്പിച്ച കമ്പ്യൂട്ടർ ലാബ്. അങ്ങനെ MES കോളേജ് എന്നെ ഉയരങ്ങളിലേക്ക് സ്വപ്നം കാണുവാൻ പഠിപ്പിച്ചു. ഇന്ന് ഞാൻ വളരെ ഹാപ്പിയാണ്. സ്വപ്നങ്ങളെ പിന്നിലാക്കി ഉയരങ്ങളിലേക്ക് ഞാൻ പറന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. യു ഹാവ് ടു ഡ്രീം ബിഫോർ യുവർ ഡ്രീംസ് ക്യാൻ കം ട്രൂ.
MES College, Irumeli, proposed PO, Irumeli, Kottayam, unaided Arts and Science College under the Muslim Educational Society, approved by Government of Kerala and affiliated to the Mahatma Gandhi University.